There it is. All right, we're back for another fun one. And I'm super excited. Not only do we have yet another awesome therapist, but this one brought her partner. So we're going to get to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. Tune in, have fun. Here we go.
Practicing Polyamory, real-life perspectives from the imperfect people of polyamory. The mission of the Practicing Polyamory podcast is to provide a platform for all of the real-life, flawed humans that practice polyamory so that we might all learn from one another and grow as a community. Enjoy the show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful, finally sunny again here in San Diego. Before we jump in and chat with our awesome guests, I want to quickly remind everybody to please follow the show on your favorite social media. Follow us on all the social medias, in fact, and you can find us everywhere at Practicing Poly. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, any other podcast app, please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you're downloading. And if you want to support the show, there's a super easy way. You're already paying for your insurance. Why not work with a polyam insurance guy? That's me. Send me a DM on your favorite social media at Practicing Poly. Talk to me about your malpractice or errors and omissions insurance. Would love to help you out. And as always, I want to remind those of you listening, if you are listening to this podcast, you are a welcome guest to be on the show. If you're actively polyam curious, or a professional serving the polyamorous community, we want to hear your story. If you are disabled, BIPOC, pan, bi, demi, gay, straight, sex worker, kinkster, queer, lesbian, trans, NB, arrow, ace, whatever it is, we want to hear your story. The more stories we hear, the more the world learns about us, the more representation we have, the better we can serve our community. So go to practicingpolyamory.com and sign up today. All right, that's my everyday spiel. And now to the best part, introducing our guest. Our guest today has an absolutely remarkable story that I can't wait to share with y'all. After a year of soul-crushing, dreadful office work at 25 years old, our guest was looking for meaningful purpose. And that's when she discovered childcare collectives. Groups of people who come together to provide childcare for one another as a way to empower and support their community. Our guest founded her own childcare collective and got involved with other charitable organizations such as Food Not Bombs, and she learned that giving back to the community is what feels most fulfilling for her. Our guest founded her... As exciting as important as that work is, she knew that she needed to do more to support her aging grandparents and young sibling. It was important to our guest to continue to give to her community, though, and she found the best way she could do that was through providing counseling services. So here she is, providing therapy that is sex-positive, trans-friendly, affirming of polyamory, while caring deeply about her clients who fit those descriptors. Joining us today out of Atlanta, Georgia, with her partner, welcome to the show, Amariah, Love, and Patrick. Here we go, dancing.
That's a lovely introduction. Thank you.
Of course. So thank you so much for making some time hanging out with me today. I guess let's start off. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Awesome story. First of all, you started these collectives. You've been involved in charitable work, all of these things that you've done in the past, and that's kind of where it seemed like when I was reading about you and doing this little bit of research, I was like, you know what? This is a good topic. We're talking about giving back and providing things to our community. So before we get to that, just tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey, I guess, into polyamory through all of these things that you went through. Where did you discover it, and how did that enter your life?
Well, polyamory began way before I started becoming more active in like grassroots organizing. I think I was 18 when I realized that I was polyamorous. I didn't even know that there was a word for it at the time. I just had kind of one of those aha moments that ended up just like defining me for the rest of my life. And I was I was just like hanging out with this dude that I was like having a really casual sexual relationship with, and I started like talking about another date I'd been on or something. And we weren't anything like official, and he was kind of an asshole anyway. And like, so nothing that he said would have had any bearing on my life whatsoever. But he expressed like this tiniest amount of jealousy. He was like, I don't want to hear you talk about other dudes. And it just hit me all of a sudden, like the idea of anybody telling me who I like can sleep with, can date, any of those things is absolutely reprehensible. Like I feel like I would be in a prison in a relationship like that. And I just kind of knew that I wasn't monogamous right then. And I honestly have no idea when I learned the word polyamorous. I did, but I don't remember when.
Oh, nice. We have laugh tracks. I love it. So, Patrick, tell me a little bit about yourself. When did you and Amariah meet, and what was your journey into polyamory?
So we actually were Facebook friends for what, like a year, something like that, before we ever actually went on a date or talked in person or anything on those lines. It was kind of a mutual friend. I had an ex who they were a metamor with Amariah for a very long time. And me and that ex had a really, really nasty breakup, and we went on a date 2 weeks later. I
didn't know they had broken up at the time.
Nope. That was our first date, was talking through all of that. So
Gotcha.
I recommend dating a therapist. It's nice. My journey into poly, it's like I remember reading some books with poly practices in them, just, like urban fantasy books when I was like 13, 14, etc. And there being poly examples in them, and just thinking, oh my God, that sounds awesome, but it's not like a real world thing. So but not on the back table until I was 25 and was just getting out of my first relationship with a man. And we started to, talk about what would it look like opening up. And I realized, no, I just don't actually want to be in this relationship, but I do want open relationships. That's what I want, actually. So kind of slowly figuring out what that looked like for me in the next couple of relationships. And yeah, here we are.
And yeah, here we are.
7 years now, something like that.
How long has it been for the two of you? I mean, just for you as 18, how long ago was it for you, Patrick?
I was 25 when I first got into my first like open relationship, ethical non-monogamy. And so that's been 6 years now.
Nice. So a lot of exploring, a lot of learning. And when the two of you got together, you were coming off of a breakup. And I mean, I'm just gonna throw it out there. I'm sure somebody's thinking it, right? Like, rebound alert. Did that kind of like was that a thing in your head? And how did you approach that?
Yeah, that was something that we were talking about literally within the first like 3 or 4 hours of like, that we were both coming off of breakups. And it was like, oh, this is probably a bad idea. Like, let's take things slow. And then we just had such a connection. Yeah. Like we ended up, it was like 3 dates in a row. And we ended up talking for like 6 hours each time, staying up till like 3 a.m., just could not stop. And it was like, okay, so there's something here.
Yeah, we were both like, let's do the smart thing and not be each other's rebounds and like take this slowly. And that just did not happen. That's not what happened. Like, we also both are fans of just like letting relationships happen the way that they're going to happen. So yes, we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. My question, as a therapist, right? We know that the mechanic has the worst car, right? I had a lawyer on who was like, oh yeah, I should do everything that I tell my clients to do, but I'm not as well protected legally as I should be. So as a therapist going into a situation like this, like what was your therapist brain telling you, and what was your heart telling you?
I'm trying to, it's only been like a little over 2 years, and it feels like such a much longer time because our second year.
To be fair, to be fair, I heard this from my partner. She said 1 COVID year is equal to 7 regular years.
7?
So
I was saying 2.
Anyway,
I think my therapist brain was the same as my like Amariah, like my rational Amariah brain, just like we both just had our hearts broken, and it's important to be like kind of cautious, but also not to cut myself off of any possibility of anything just because I've been hurt recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I listen to both parts of myself pretty equally and ended up making the right choice.
So far, so good. That's awesome. That's great. No, it's interesting, you know, when, like I said, when you think about it from this perspective of, you know, you have all of this training as a therapist, and I wonder how that intersects with your life. You know, there's you cannot take yourself completely out of your work, nor can you take your work out of your life. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of that intersectionality, some of the ways that maybe your personal life and professional life kind of merge and blur the lines?
There are so many. Well, one that like immediately comes to mind is the fact that like when you are kind of a part of all of these different communities, the kink, poly, burner, you know, flow community, queer communities, they have a lot of overlapping and intersecting, you know, specifically in Atlanta, which is where I live and work. And I find, you know, not infrequently that I have to, like, sometimes I have to refer people out because, like, we've been friends on Facebook for too long, or like we've been on friends on Facebook at all, or like we have too many friends in common. I had a like, and I know that I know several other therapists, like especially folks who work in the kink community, which is just like I think even smaller. There, and I know some therapists who like won't go to things like Frolicon or like 1763 because there's the risk of like seeing clients there. I've seen a client at a kink convention before.
Yeah.
Saw my therapist there.
Yeah. So like you have to have these conversations with clients. Like usually, absolutely in the first session, if I ever think there's going to be any kind of social intersection, we talk about what that means, how they feel about that, like what the protocol is for if we run into each other in public. So there's that aspect. And then there's also like, there's just the, like, you know, after I've spent a day being a therapist, I am usually pretty emotionally spent, especially like during the pandemic. My work has taken most of the pandemic, my work has taken every single bit of energy that I've had. So like after a work day, I have nothing in me, and or I want to talk to Patrick, who's the only person I've been quarantining with, about like all the crazy shit that just happened in my work day. And he usually has about 15 minutes of being able to listen to me talk about therapy before he's like, okay, hon, now my spoons are gone. So yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
I was going to say, ironically enough, it was probably 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, something like that. My partner at the time and me were looking for a couples therapist, and she was like in the name, the top three. And I asked my other girlfriend at the time, like, hey, you know, do you have any recommendations? And you know, I'm very thankful for this, even though it was a really nasty thing to do. She was like, oh, don't go to Amariah. She's a crazy person.
Wow.
And this was the Metamor. And I'm thankful that I didn't go to Amariah, because then, you know, we would never have been able to date. But turns out, you know, that ex, you know, has some mental instability issues, so didn't really take her at her word later.
Yes, I'm glad that you didn't. It was very sad. I was sad to hear that. But I'm also glad that he didn't see me as a client, because yeah, then we never would have been able to date. So
it worked out. It totally worked out. There is like a time limit, right? Like after 2 years or 4 years or something like that. But there's probably
basically I think our code of ethics says like you can kind of be friends with somebody, you can consider being friends with somebody after 5 years, but it's never okay to enter into any kind of romantic or sexual relationship with a client.
It's just
got it.
Yeah, too much of a power dynamic issue there. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Now, Patrick, you mentioned that you actually ran into your therapist at some kind of was it a kink convention or
Yeah,
something like that? Okay,
yeah.
so I
And at
want
the
to hear.
Atlantic Eagle, like, I mean, I've seen my therapist all over the place.
So, Amariah, you mentioned that there's like a protocol that you talk about. Patrick, did you have that protocol conversation? And how does it go when you run into your therapist out in town like that?
Yeah, for me, it was it was a little bit weird just because when I see somebody in public that I know, I want to be like, oh, hey, how's it going? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and there to be some kind of camaraderie there. My therapist at the time, kind of protocol that we had decided on, was to just say, like, hey, like, oh, obviously we know each other. And they basically just let me set the speed of the conversation, or, you know, I could say how I know them, et cetera, but that they wouldn't bring anything up, right? The only reason why that was at all weird was at Frolicon, this convention that we were at, you know, past them in the hall, you know, just brief little intersection of, oh, hey, you know, didn't see you there kind of moment, and
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, hadn't seen them as a therapist for probably 6 months. It had been a while. Would have been nice to catch up, but like, we were running past each other. So
Got it. So no, not a huge interaction, and you just kind of let it play itself out.
yeah.
Nothing crazy. Amariah, what about you? If you have that conversation with your patients, what do you tell them?
That's what his therapist does, is like pretty much across the board ethically what you're supposed to do. When you say, like, if we see each other in public, the client gets to set the pace. Like, generally I won't even acknowledge that I know them until they acknowledge me first, because it's technically a breach of confidentiality, to like let anybody know that they know me. And then, like, if they want to introduce me or say how they know me, they can, but otherwise I'll acknowledge them if they acknowledge me. If they say hi, I'll say hi. Like, it's exactly what he described. That's how you protect confidentiality for clients.
Yeah, got it. That makes perfect sense. And so if they don't say hi, then you just ignore them like they're not even in the room.
Yep.
Nah, I like it.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Well done. Well played.
I had one. I saw a client one time at Frolicana as well, and like the reason that it was a little, I was worried it was going to be weird. I knew that they were going to be there, and at Frolicana is a kink convention, and I was like in, I don't know, like a mini skirt and a bra, you know, like I was not wearing a whole lot of clothing. And they waved at me, and I waved back, and that was it. It was fine. And I just because of the kind of, like, the clients that I work with are, so many of them are in the kink community, in the poly community. Almost all of them are queer. I've never had a client like have any issue with running into me at a burn, you know, topless, or like at a kink convention. Like, they actually prefer to have a therapist who is like in their communities, and like involved with the things that they're involved in. Like, no, there's not like a whole bunch of vocabulary they have to explain to me. So yeah, it's not really been a problem.
Yeah, it's more than just an understanding. It's like it's a real, how do I say? It's more than just knowing the terminology, like you were saying. It's really a deeper understanding. Like you're part of it, but that doesn't change their view of you. You know, if they see you, like you said, topless or whatever, the next time that they see you, is it awkward?
When that's happened, no. And that hasn't happened many times. To be clear, I do try to avoid, like, if I see a client out of the corner of my eye at a burn and I'm topless, I will go the other way. Like, I just try to avoid that. But no. Sorry, what was the question? I forgot.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't make it awkward. It's like, oh, no, just go the other way.
Yeah, just avoid that.
I love it. So we started talking about, you know, all these different organizations that you were involved with, all of these ways that you were giving back. One of the big ways that you give back now is by providing, these counseling services, therapy services. I imagine that it's super rewarding. Do you do any other, or are you involved in any other organizations? Do you still do other charitable things?
Right now, actually, I just resigned from the one kind of role that I did have in the burn community, but since especially since the pandemic, I have not really had much extra energy for anything.
Yeah.
I was going to say my boyfriend has been starting to work with her and with my friend Ryan on a couple of things, and we have some projects that are kind of like in the fire, kind of working, whether or not they will pan out and whatnot. And one of them is the Love Card program, right, which hopefully will get bigger as time goes on.
Yeah.
What is that?
I hope it does. Well, actually, his partner, whose name is also Patrick.
It's not weird at all.
No, Patrick and Patrick. Okay.
Is brilliant and creative, and really, really talented at marketing. And I was kind of lamenting about how my income had gone down pretty significantly because I couldn't work as much during the pandemic. Just because my capacity for work went down so much. Like if I tried to work as much as I was before, and I was having like regular mental breakdowns. So I was like, I have to reduce my hours. And I have a lot of clients who I see on a sliding scale, right? So I try to like accessibility of mental health care is really important to me. So I try to have as many people as I can with reduced fees. And I wanted to continue that, but seeing, almost not much more, like 60%, I'd say, of how many people I was able to see before, like my capacity for sliding scale was going down. And then I was having clients, like their financial situations were getting worse during the pandemic, of course.
Yeah.
Like, so they needed like more help. And I was finding myself in a position to be able to give less and less help. Anyway, so I was talking to the Patricks about this, and he came up with this idea just like in 5 seconds, because that's what he does. And he like
spits out gold.
Came to my place, came over the next day and like made it happen on the computer. Basically it's a gift card that's like embedded into my website. It's like called the Love Card program, and anybody can go on there and like buy love cards to contribute to, if they want to contribute specifically to somebody that they care about, to their therapy, like to subsidize their therapy, or just like a general pool for sliding scale clients. And I also had a sizable donation and am still able to. I still have a little bit of that left. Every one of my sliding scale clients, I was able to subsidize their fees for the next like 6 months or something. It's been about that long. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think the long-term plan, theoretically, if it was able to grow and whatnot, would be to open it up. I know there's a lovely program that the name is escaping me, that is for Black women to be able to have funded therapy, right? Yeah. And it's awesome. It got out, I think, from a Kickstarter or something on those lines from someone's birthday. And I think the long-term plan would be something on those lines for this program to kind of open it up to queer individuals to be able to get more funded therapy. That's
the hope, is like, I would love for it to just be one giant pool, and some kind of I think the other one is a nonprofit. And they have it so that like, if you're a Black woman, you just like call this organization, tell them who your therapist is, and like they subsidize your therapy. And I would really love to do that for queer folks. So we do have a couple of projects like in the works to try to fund that. But it's little things moving kind of slowly, because we're all
Tired.
We're all tired.
It's coming to an end, you know. I mean, it's
Mhm.
we're seeing more and more vaccinations, and you know, slowly here in California, things are really starting to open up. So, you know, fingers crossed, July.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's what they were aiming for. So hopefully we'll get back to rolling, get back to doing all the things that we were doing before. Let's see what else. Fun things. What are some of the, I don't know, some of you. I'm like trying to think. Do I go favorite or do I go struggles? Like, it's like what are some of your favorite things? What are some of the biggest struggles? I think struggles are probably more easier for people to relate with. You know, maybe you know what, Patrick, I'll pick on you a little bit. As a bisexual man, do you ever feel like there's any kind of stigma within the community or anything like that? Do you ever experience any kind of what's the word that I'm looking for? Why am I not thinking right now?
Bi-erasure?
What's that?
Bi-erasure, perhaps?
I said bi-erasure or
Bi-erasure, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Anything
massively.
like that.
Oh yeah, massively so.
Tell me about it.
I played gay rugby for 3 or 4 years, something like that. It's inclusive rugby is another name for it, and it was an amazing experience. Great. And it was kind of like my first queer community in Atlanta after I moved back from New York. But I remember even literally the first party was a Christmas party that I met any of the guys from the team at. Just random occurrence, date brought me, and turns out to be a rugby party. I remember at that party, first time I meet any of them, there was a joke that was made of like, oh, don't you just love it? You know, like there's a guy says that he's bi, but really he just needs a good hard dickin'. And everybody's laughing. Oh, that's so funny. And I'm like, I'm bi. You know, like it's just from the get-go, it's just kind of ingrained in a lot of gay male culture, specifically cis gay male culture. And it kind of it's all over the community as well, not just on that side. I remember, so like my last relationship, she told me that if I were to ever have a serious boyfriend, that like there's never going to be, and this is kind of a little bit of a quote, there's never going to be a woman that you're ever going to date who's going to be okay with you not using condoms with a boyfriend. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, there's so much stigma that is associated with men having sex with men and risk factors and everything on those lines that I think gets elevated a lot more than if you're talking just strictly.
And what constitutes safe sex?
Yeah, what even constitutes like safe sex is kind of a little bit loaded, I would say.
I would love to kind of learn a little bit more. I consider myself a little uneducated in this space, so could you kind of expound on that a little bit? Give me some more information. Like, what are some of those topics that you know, the safer sex specifically?
Yeah.
What are the conversations that are happening, and what should we be? I don't know how to say it. Like, what are they saying, and why is it not true?
No, that's a good question. So I would say what you think of as like safe sex, I think the conversation really just needs to be shifted more towards the idea of risk mitigation and what are your risk factors, and kind of trying to quantify that and deciding for yourself what is a risk factor that I'm okay with, that I'm happy with, et cetera, and that being a discussion with your partners. And so like, admittedly, the idea of having like a rule or a relationship agreement that is, okay, this is what safe sex is you use condoms with everybody, but we don't use it within our relationship. It feels like a little bit of a
hierarchy,
fast and easy kind of rule to put on it, but not necessarily fitting with what all the risk factors are actually present. So before I have any sexual partner that is new, or somebody who is not in a relationship, so like me and Amariah or me and Patrick, right? I don't talk risk factors with them before we have sex every single time. But anybody else, and same for them, I go through, okay, when was the last time you were tested? What were all the things that you were tested for? How many people have you been with since the last time you got tested? And what is your normal sexual practice? Like, I might have a friends with benefits, even though it's a loaded term, who, hey, they went to a gangbang. More power to you, honey. That is awesome. Tell me all about it. We might have a slightly different, playtime if you have like a much more elevated risk factor. And so for us, the way it works is, for people who have not had high risk activity, who've only been with one person, who they can also, track in the same way that you would think about like COVID risk before vaccinations. Then I might be comfortable having barrierless sex, depending on what that risk level is and how many people have I been with since the last time I was tested. I'm on medication PrEP, so I'm effectively immune from HIV. There's only been like a couple dozen, something along those lines, people who have contracted HIV. And as part of that program, I get tested for basically everything under the sun that you can get tested for, except for HSV, every 3 months. Right, so it provides me a really good testing cadence. So that makes me feel a lot better personally.
And me a lot better.
Yeah.
But I definitely had my ideas of safe, like what I considered safe sex, have shifted since I've been with Patrick. Like I thought of like, if you don't have condoms and you're not having safe sex, and really that's not the case. Like if you've both been tested, if you know exactly, and there hasn't been, sex since the last time you were tested with another person, like you can, and both people are on PrEP and they both get tested regularly, and this is somebody that you trust, like you bring the risk, you bring the risk mitigation like down so low, where it's what is the word I'm looking for? It's safer sex. Like, even if you're not, sometimes you can have safer sex without a barrier, safer sex with a barrier. So I kind of like had to learn to tweak that language.
Yeah, it really kind of depends. And I feel like, especially when I talk to the folks who are not really in the gay male community at all, don't really interface with that, because PrEP is and that testing protocol is very endemic to gay male spaces.
Yeah.
It's just all over the place. But when I talk to, my straight friends, they've never even heard of it, and like, what kind of risk discussion do you have with a one night stand? Again, loaded term, but most of my friends, in college or whatnot, they barely have a discussion before, it's just, oh, we'll use a condom, it's fine, it's safe.
Right.
But that's it doesn't really take into account what actual risk is. And yeah, it seems like a very imperfect way to deal with a very evolving question.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that the one night stand that isn't necessarily somebody that you're going to have, well, a lot of people aren't going to have that full conversation of the risk factors and everything. A lot of times at the one night stand, it's, we're hitting it off at the bar, and next thing you know, we're, going back to your place or my place or whatever. And, we just grab the condom and that's how it goes. But you seem to believe that there could be more that can be done than just grab the condom. What else can we do?
Well, honestly, having that discussion is more important than anything. Like, in my opinion, more important than the barrier itself. The barrier is a useful tool. It's a tool in the toolbox. But at the end of the day, barriers don't really protect against HSV. They don't protect against HPV almost at all. Like, a little bit.
They bring down the risk like this much.
Yeah, because unless it's covered by that barrier, it's not really going to be protecting against it. And so, there are plenty of, depending on what your vaccination protocol is, there's plenty of HPVs that will raise your risk of cervical cancer, raise your risk of, oodles and oodles of things that aren't protected. So to me, like, well, if you are just having a lot of sex that are using barriers, theoretically, if you aren't covering these other aspects of your risk, if you aren't having that discussion and realizing what your contact points are and how it trails out, I mean, you're opening yourself up for potential other health issues down the line. So honestly, having that discussion, even with a one night stand, is to me like basic protocol, in my sex life at least.
Well, and our only like we consider it a relationship agreement. That's like sort of like a rule around sexual activity, is that we just don't have unbarriered sex with anybody that we just met.
Yeah,
Right.
Like,
so first date, no.
Yeah.
like, because people can lie. Like, just give it a little bit of time to build up some trust before, you know, trusting that they're telling the truth in those conversations, because that's really important too.
Totally reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, before this relationship, like, I'd never been with anyone who got tested every 3 months without exception.
Yeah.
And
She'd also never been with a hoe before, so.
Too funny.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Wait. Okay.
That's right.
Too funny. You know, I wanted to ask you, we're a little bit over time here, but I wanted to ask you, Patrick, because you were talking about PrEP. The last time that I spoke with anybody on the show about PrEP, they were in Canada, so kind of rules didn't apply the same. For people who might be learning about it right now, might be interested about it right now, what has your experience been with it? You know, physically, like, you know, side effects or whatever, but also insurance wise, like how is that covered?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I get it covered through my insurance. You know, I'm a financial guy. I get it covered through work. I have decent insurance, and so it's a privilege that I have that it gets covered. And I go to a pretty gay male centric practice, my doctor's office. So like, it's just, they know exactly what they're doing. They know how to get it covered, etc. I have plenty of friends who have to go through other, you know, specific organizations to be able to get that care. My experience with it in terms of my body and what have you is honestly, it's like a sugar pill that I take every day. Like, I don't have any real impact on my body of it. It's just a thing that I take. I have to take other medications anyway, so it's just, yep, let me take my 3 or 4 pills every day. So
there you go. Pretty easy then. That's good. As long as people have access to pretty decent insurance or can contact some of those organizations that you were talking about. Well, like I said, we are definitely a little bit over time. I really appreciate both of you coming on and hanging out with me here today. Amariah, I want to give you the floor here. If people wanted to work with you, if people want to get help from you, if they want to contribute to the love cards, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and get the help that they need?
Just going to my website, amariahlove.com. The Love Card program has its own little page on there. That's easy to find. I think at the top there just says Love Card program that you can click on. And then there's a big orange button that says request an appointment. And my phone number and my email address are on like the sidebar on my website. Right now, I am not accepting new clients. I'm actually, I have a bit of a waiting list going. It's not too long. So I'm still like willing to put folks on the waiting list and really hoping that like, as I transition back into having more in-person sessions, as that becomes safer and safer and more people are vaccinated, that my capacity will go up and I'll be able to like have more of a caseload. But for the most part, I am sending people to my referral page, which is also on my website. It's amariahlove.com/referrals. I have a list of amazing therapists who are all like poly, LGBTQ, sex positive, queer friendly, all that stuff. And that's on my website as well.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you both so much for spending a little bit of time with me. I really appreciate you. And this has been great. Oh, there we go. We got the clap track again.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate
it. All right. And thank you also, as always, to our live audience for tuning in today. As a reminder, when we're live, we get no commercial interruptions, but the same cannot be said for those podcast downloads. So if you want to avoid the commercial interruptions, be sure to catch us live Monday through Wednesday, 2:30 Pacific time. Or sign up for our Patreon where you get access to our commercial-free RSS feed and support the show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and wherever it is that you're downloading your podcast. And if you haven't already, please leave us a review. Really going to appreciate that. Thank you both again so much. And for everybody else out there,
have a nice day. Thank you for tuning in to the Practicing Polyamory podcast. Would you or someone in your polycule like to be a guest? Sign up at practicingpolyamory.com and join the conversation. Please support us by subscribing, liking, and following us on social media at Practicing Polya by clicking any of the affiliate links on our website or by subscribing